You know, we've demolished a number of buildings in 2014, and we've got, what, 4 more buildings to do in 2015 that we'll talk about. So in this case, this is the building 1121 in Site 12 in the neighborhood. Next. And this is the solid waste disposal area at Bigelow Court, where it was a radiological lead and a PCB cleanup that we completed. Did you want to talk a little bit about this, Dave? Just the guys in action here?
Yeah, this is really typical of some of the shallow subsurface excavation that you'll see at Treasure Island. One of the characteristics, you'll see a lot of utilities. Over the years, crisscrossing utilities. We know where some are, we know where some aren't. And so it's sort of a tedious process. Sometimes you have to do some hand digging and going around these because sometimes they're active, sometimes they're not, sometimes you're not exactly sure. So right now, this is what you'll typically see for post excavation. In this particular, it looks like they're done and they're doing some surveying to determine whether or not we have accurate depths. Because our work plans generally have accepted depths to where we're going to dig. In this case, it would vary between 2 and 4 feet below ground surface for chemical. And as Keith mentioned, we really didn't see any debris to speak of in the excavation. We were really chasing, those lead hits and the PCBs probably from the historical transformer storage that went on there.
And then, of course, on the right, completed excavation prior to backfill. And you can see how it kind of looks like an archaeological dig. And those in the Treasure Island neighborhood that were able to see this or stand up on the benches and look over the fences and see this, you can see it looks a lot like an archaeological dig. There's different layers, and they're peeled back. And you can see, it's harder to see here, but it's easier to see here, how clean the soil looked when we took, not only when we took soil samples in the lab, but the visual look at it. What we're looking for in a solid waste disposal area normally is layers of either rubbish or burn ash or just trash that's been disposed of that isn't in a smaller form. Sometimes it's in an aggregate form. But we didn't really find much of that here.
No, and as much as the chemical world, a lot of times, it's a matter of collecting a sample and sending it to the lab. When you have these open excavations, it gives you the opportunity to visually see what's there, and that really tells you a lot about what the site was used for. It answers a lot of questions, and so that's why, although we've designated this as a solid waste disposal area, this is not what a typical disposal area that we've encountered looks like. For example, West Side Drive, you actually can see the material and you're bringing it up. Yeah. So this typically was not a heavily used area for disposal, and so that's what you'll end up seeing there. So yeah, this is probably as surgical of a removal as you'll see. Which is typically a result of a lot of samples and a lot of planning, which is sometimes why it takes a long time. A lot of planning goes into it so that we move the minimal amount of material possible to basically save taxpayer dollars ultimately.
Yes. Okay. And some field work photos from Site 27. Site 27, Bryce Bartello was the project manager. He's here. And again, this is where, this was the part, if you could show, of Clipper Cove, if you know where Clipper Cove is. Site 27 is a little wedge in Clipper Cove, and it's where, when the base was active, they, as a hobby, used to do skeet shooting. And if anyone here has done any skeet shooting or seen it, right, it's basically involves shooting little clay pigeons, right, with a lot of lead shot that comes out of the long barrel guns you usually use for that. So they did a lot of skeet shooting, and that means that lead shot was deposited in that area of Clipper Cove, which was part of the skeet range. So it's kind of interesting, right? A base is active for many years. They do something as innocuous as a hobby, like skeet shooting, and the base closes, and decades later, it turns into a cleanup site that has to be investigated, and federal funding applied to cleaning it up. It's interesting when you see this, if you could go back in time, it would be interesting, the different perspectives you would find on that. So, Site 27, what we did here is the cleanup objective was to protect the diving ducks. So we put some rock armor in and we dredged out sediments along the shoreline. We took over 8,700 cubic yards of sediments out. and ultimately barged them over to former Naval Air Station Alameda, and we placed rock at the bottom of the excavation. And this cubic yard is a lot. Just to give you a point of comparison, we did over 8,700 cubic yards, and if you were to take a standard-sized dump truck, that handles 14 cubic yards. So you can imagine, that's an awful lot of dump truckfuls of sediment that we removed out of Clipper Cove. Then we did an underwater survey, a bathymetric survey, right, that I believe was complete on November 18th. And now we're working, as I indicated, with many people in the marina, and including the little Treasure Island Yacht Club, right, including Mr. Pilgrim, Alice's husband, on marina controls to protect the remedy. And we're coordinating that because our rock armor remedy that we put in along the shoreline, the Navy needs to make sure that it's protected, not just now, but in the future. And we know what's going to happen. The City of San Francisco's redevelopment plan envisions quadrupling the size of the existing marina. It's actually quite a small marina, for sailboats and such. It's going to be much, much larger when the City of San Francisco's redevelopment plan vision comes into effect. So we want to make sure that this much larger marina doesn't discount our remedy and make sure that it is protective of diving ducks well into the future. And the first step on that was implementing this rock armor and doing the dredging. And the second step was doing the first underwater survey. And we'll continue. There will be other underwater surveys in the future to ensure that the condition of the surface is still protected. Okay, next slide. Transfer update.
So this is really the first map of this type we've had because to this date there actually have been 4 separate finding suitabilities for transfer. And the first two were done several years ago, included YBI and Treasure Island. And then the last one, which is FOST 4, so we're numbering them in order just because it's easier, 1, 2, 3, 4, which one was first. The latest one is 4. And what you see here is a collection of the property that is either suitable for transfer or has transferred. So just going down the legend, you see that you'll see the tan is the initial transfer, we're calling it uplands, basically the land. So this is a collection of property that, generally speaking, has gone through the environmental process all the way. Most of the area did not have any sites actually on it. Typically there will be some petroleum tanks removed, etc. And when you look at that, you can basically take a reverse snapshot or perhaps a negative, and what you have on the left basically are open sites or that we just walked through, and you'll see it sort of matches up to the map there. So you'll see
this is site 21, building 3.
21 in building 3.
This is the force main sewer that Danielle is going to investigate this coming year, so it's not ready for transfer, still being investigated, right? This is site 24, our groundwater site. It's not ready yet. Building 233 is almost ready, but it's not ready yet. We don't have a free release from the state of California. We think we've done all the rat cleanup work we need to, but we don't have their approval yet. So anything minus that is basically going to be, these big chunks are all going to be transferred in perhaps in the next 60 days.
Correct. Oh. And you have the hashed area, a little hard to see here, we'll make it bright pink next time.
It's right.
But right now you have, it's basically this submerged area. The Navy owns offshore area. Really nothing magical about it. It was a site because we owned it, so we investigated it. But it really is very contiguous with the bay itself. But it is a site and it will be transferred to the city as well.
Right.
Last but not least, the gray area, those are properties that previously were transferred to other entities, specifically other governmental agencies. So it was a Fed-to-Fed transfer. Right. And in the middle, you'll see the Job Corps area, which property went to the Job Corps, still operates today, still is owned by them. And then everything on Yerba Buena that's gray actually is owned either by Federal Highways or Caltrans. Federal Highways, it was taken from Navy to Federal Highways, so Fed-to-Fed transfer. Federal Highways in turn gave it to Caltrans. The Coast Guard, of course, has been there a long time. and they have a large footprint on Yerba Buena, and they probably will for some time to come.
Right.
So as we'll talk about in the future, you'll really see that these areas here in white, that's the focus in the future. The final frontier, of course, being Site 12.
Right. So some of the significant things here is where the Navy headquarters is, where Patricia McFadden, if you know her, she's in the caretaker site office in Building 1, the very first building when you come down TI here. One of the interesting things is we're transferring the building that we work out of here in Treasure Island, right? Will be owned by the City of San Francisco. So we will go from being a landlord to a tenant.
Correct.
Ah, so, yeah. So there's some interesting things that are going on, but this is huge because this is a big chunk of Treasure Island that's ready to transfer, that's going to be transferred in the very near future. And again, as Dave said, it's almost like a photographic negative. That which isn't being transferred, the Site 12 neighborhood, needs more work. Site 6, Site 32, Site 24, and then Building 3 and Site 21, and then Building 233, and then the pipeline areas and the force mains that need to be investigated.
Correct.
But for instance, Alice, where you're living, is about to be transferred. So that whole neighborhood on Yerba Buena Island is about ready to swing over and to become the City of San Francisco proper. So that is huge news. Okay, so thank you. So with that, well, first of all, what we do here is we have questions from the RAB, I believe, and then questions from the community. So we'll open it up. Dave and I will